The thunderous rumble of an approaching freight train shattered the peaceful dawn silence across Wyoming's frost-covered wilderness. Through the swirling morning mist, a heart-wrenching scene unfolded on the gleaming steel tracks. A massive grizzly bear, her powerful frame bound by cruel chains, desperately fought against her restraints as her 4 terrified cubs huddled close. As the train's vibrations grew stronger and its blinding headlight pierced the fog, the mother bear did something that would forever haunt those who witnessed it. She stopped struggling, tenderly nuzzled each of her precious cubs one final time, and closed her eyes, accepting what seemed to be their inevitable fate. But destiny had other plans that frigid February morning, as an unlikely hero was about to change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. David Chen lowered his steaming cup of coffee, his hands trembling as he stared in disbelief through the window of his remote cabin. What had started as a routine morning observing wildlife for his doctoral research on grizzly bear behavior had suddenly transformed into a nightmare. Through his high-powered spotting scope, he could clearly see the horrific scene unfolding less than half a mile away, a sight that would forever change his understanding of both human cruelty and animal resilience. The mother bear's once magnificent coat was matted with blood and ice, telling a story of prolonged captivity and abuse. Her cubs, barely 3 months old, pressed against her massive frame, too young to comprehend their situation, but instinctively sensing their mother's distress. Their soft whimpers carried on the bitter wind, reaching David's ears like a desperate plea for help. Without a second thought, David grabbed his emergency rescue kit, a necessity for his work in the wilderness, and sprinted toward the tracks, his boots crunching through the crusty snow. 15 years of studying these magnificent creatures had taught him to maintain a respectful distance, especially from mothers with cubs. But this was different. This was a deliberate act of cruelty that demanded immediate action. As he ran, his mind raced through possibilities of who could have done this. The chains weren't random. They were heavy-duty logging chains, methodically wrapped to ensure no escape. This was planned, calculated, and spoke of a darkness that had no place. In these mountains he'd come to call home. The train's whistle pierced the air again. Closer now, its echo bouncing off the surrounding peaks. David's lungs burned in the freezing air as he pushed himself harder, knowing every second counted. The mother bear's eyes locked onto him as he approached, and what he saw in them stopped him in his tracks. There was no aggression, no wild fear. Instead, he saw an intelligence and desperation that reminded him of another pair of eyes he'd never forget. His daughter Maya's eyes had held that same look 5 years ago, the night of the accident that took his wife Lisa's life, that same helpless plea for someone, anyone, to make things right. The memory propelled him forward with renewed determination. He wouldn't fail these creatures the way he felt he'd failed his family that night. Reaching the tracks, David worked frantically at the first lock with his multi-tool. The mother bear watched him, her massive body tense, but not threatening. Up close, he could see fresh wounds where she'd fought against her bonds, likely for days. The cubs whimpered, pressing closer to their mother, their small bodies trembling with cold and fear. The ground began to vibrate beneath his feet as the train approached. David could see its headlight now, a bright beam cutting through the morning mist. His fingers, numb from cold and adrenaline, struggled with the stubborn lock. "Come on, come on," he muttered through clenched teeth, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The mother bear suddenly shifted, and David stumbled backward, expecting an attack. Instead, she stretched her neck forward, making the chains more accessible. Their eyes met, and in that moment, David felt a connection he couldn't explain. Two parents who would do anything to protect their young. The first lock finally gave way with a sharp click. David moved to the second one, his movements frantic now. The train's horn blasted, deafening at this distance. The engineer must have spotted them, but on these mountain tracks, stopping quickly wasn't possible. David could feel the heat of the train's approach, hear the screech of emergency brakes, being applied too late. With a final desperate heave, the second lock broke free. The chains fell away, but the mother bear seemed frozen in place, momentarily stunned by her sudden freedom. David didn't think. He acted on pure instinct, breaking every rule he'd learned about wildlife interaction. He clapped his hands and shouted, startling the bear family into motion. The mother bear lunged forward, snatching two cubs by the scruff of their necks. David scooped up the other two, ignoring every scientific principle and safety protocol he'd ever learned. Together, they dove down the steep embankment as the train thundered past, so close he could feel the rush of displaced air. They tumbled through snow and brush before landing in a heap at the bottom. For a moment, David lay there, heart racing, ears ringing from the train's passage. Then he felt movement, the cubs squirming in his arms, alive and unharmed. A few feet away, the mother bear rose shakily, her own cubs safe in her grasp. David slowly set the cubs down, expecting the mother bear to charge him. Any wild animal would after such an encounter. But she didn't. Instead, she waited as her cubs bounded to her, checking each one with gentle nudges. Then she turned to David, and in her gaze, he saw something that defied scientific explanation, a moment of connection, of understanding between two species that transcended the natural order. As the bear family disappeared into the forest shelter, David sat in the snow, his body trembling from more than just cold. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone in this remote mountain region had looked at these magnificent creatures and seen only objects for their cruelty. The thought made his stomach turn. Pulling out his satellite phone, he first called the wildlife authorities, then dialed a number he'd been avoiding for weeks. "Maya," he said when his daughter answered, "I need your help. Something's happening. Up here, something wrong. And I think it might be connected to those new friends you mentioned at school." The silence on the other end of the line confirmed his worst fears, and David knew his morning's rescue wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would force both him and his daughter to confront the darkness that had driven them apart and find their way back to what truly mattered. The forest held its breath as David Chen climbed back up to the railroad tracks, his muscles aching from the morning's desperate rescue. His satellite phone felt heavy in his pocket, Maya's troubled silence still echoing in his mind. Patches of blood stained the snow where the mother bear had been chained, each crimson drop telling a story of prolonged suffering that made his hands clench into fists. As a wildlife biologist specializing in large predator behavior, David had witnessed nature's harsh realities countless times. But this was different. This was calculated cruelty, and somewhere in his daughter's silence lay a thread that might lead to the truth. She had finally mumbled something about coming to the cabin after school, but he had heard the fear in her voice, the same tremor she'd had in the months following Lisa's death. David followed the bear family's tracks through the deepening snow, grateful for his years of tracking experience. The mother was moving slowly, clearly struggling with injuries that went beyond the obvious chain wounds. Her cubs' smaller prints showed them staying close, their path weaving through the dense underbrush of the Wyoming wilderness. The trail led toward Angel Creek, which ran through his research property, a blessing in disguise. 3 years ago, after the accident that shattered his family, David had transformed his 20-acre plot into an unofficial wildlife rehabilitation center. What had started as a way to escape his grief had evolved into something meaningful, a place where injured animals could heal before returning to the wild. The local Native American community had named it Medicine Waters for the way broken creatures seemed to find healing there. The bears had found shelter in a natural cave near the creek's edge. David approached carefully, making soft sounds to announce his presence. The mother bear's eyes gleamed from the shadows, alert but not aggressive. Her cubs huddled behind her, their small faces peeking out with a mixture of fear and curiosity that tugged at his heart. "Easy there, beautiful," David said softly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He could see her wounds better now, deep gashes where the chains had cut into her flesh, older scars telling a story of previous abuse. Someone had held her captive for weeks, maybe months. The thought made bile rise in his throat. The bear watched as he slowly set down his backpack and withdrew a tranquilizer gun, standard equipment for his rehabilitation work. He had permits and training to use it, though he rarely needed to. "I'm sorry," he whispered, taking aim, "but it's the only way I can help you." The dart found its mark. The mother bear let out a low moan, but didn't charge. Instead, she turned to her cubs, gently nudging them deeper into the cave before her legs began to wobble. She laid down gracefully, her eyes never leaving David as the sedative took effect. David waited until he was sure she was unconscious. Before approaching, the cubs whimpered but stayed close to their mother, too young and scared to run. He worked quickly, cleaning her wounds with supplies from his pack. The injuries were worse than he'd feared. Infection had set in around the deepest cuts, and several old fractures had healed improperly, suggesting repeated trauma. His phone buzzed, a text from Maya. "Dad, I'm coming now, can't wait for school to end. There's something you need to know." David's stomach tightened. Part of him wanted to demand answers immediately, but experience had taught him that pushing too hard would only make Maya retreat further. Like working with injured wildlife, some things couldn't be rushed. He focused on the task at hand, carefully applying antibiotic ointment to the bear's wounds. The cubs had grown bolder, occasionally sniffing at his hands before darting back to safety. They were thin but not starving. Someone had been feeding them, keeping them alive for some purpose he couldn't yet fathom. The sound of an approaching ATV made David look up. Through the trees, he could see Maya's distinctive red quad bike approaching. She must have taken the old logging road. Smart girl, they'd need the vehicle's winch to move the sedated bear. His daughter emerged from the machine, her teenage frame hunched against the cold. Her face went pale when she saw the bears. "Dad, She started, then stopped, swallowed hard. Her eyes, so like her mother's, filled with tears as she took in the bear's injuries. "Help me first," David said firmly. "Questions later." Together, they worked to secure the mother bear on a tarp, using the ATV's winch to carefully load her onto the small trailer they often used for injured wildlife. The cubs, surprisingly, followed willingly, staying close to their mother. David couldn't help but notice how Maya's hands shook as she worked, how she couldn't quite look at the bear's injuries. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It was Trevor's idea, Maya finally said, as they drove slowly back to the cabin. Her voice was barely a whisper. He said he found them near his uncle's hunting cabin. Said we could train them, make money showing them off at private parties, like a circus. David gripped the ATV's handlebars tighter, but kept his voice steady. We'll talk about it at home. Right now, these bears need our help. The rehabilitation center behind his cabin was ready. David had radioed ahead to his assistant, Sarah Running Wolf, a local veterinarian who had joined his mission after treating too many animals injured by human cruelty. She had prepared the largest enclosure and gathered medical supplies. As they unloaded the bears, Maya spoke again, her words tumbling out. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Trevor said his uncle would help, that he knew how to handle bears. But then things got bad. When the mother bear stopped cooperating, they decided to... She choked on the words. Chain them to the tracks, David finished, the morning scene replaying in his mind. Make it look like an accident. Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. I tried to stop them, Dad, last night when they said what they were going to do. But Trevor and his uncle, they've got something on me. Something about the night. Mum died, something I never told you. David paused in his work, really looking at his daughter for the first time in months. He saw not the angry teenager who'd been slipping away, but the scared girl who'd lost her mother too young. Whatever secret Maya carried, it couldn't be worse than what almost happened this morning. We'll figure it out, David said, pulling his daughter into a rough hug. But first, we need to get the authorities involved. What Trevor and his uncle did, it's not just cruel, it's criminal. As if understanding their conversation, the mother bear stirred slightly in her sedated state. One of her cubs had curled up against her neck, while the others explored their new enclosure under Sarah's watchful eye. Looking at them, David felt a fierce determination rise within him. These bears had been given a second chance at life. Maybe this was his and Maya's second chance too. But first, they had to make things right, and that meant facing the darkness that had led to this moment, no matter how ugly the truth might be. As the sun climbed higher over the Wyoming wilderness, David knew that the real work, the healing of both animals and humans, was just beginning. Sarah approached with fresh bandages, her dark eyes taking in the scene before her. And a member of the Eastern Shoshone tribe, she understood better than most the sacred connection between humans and the wild creatures they shared the land with. The mother's fever is high, she reported, but she's strong. These bears, they chose to come here, to Medicine Waters. That's not coincidence. David watched as she began changing the bear's bandages with practiced hands. In the 3 years they'd worked together, he'd learned to respect her blend of modern veterinary medicine and traditional healing wisdom. What do you see in this, Sarah? She was quiet for a moment, her hands never stopping their gentle work. I see balance wanting to be restored. These bears, your daughter, this land. Everything is connected. The healing that needs to happen isn't just physical. Maya had moved closer to the enclosure, watching the cubs with a mixture of guilt and wonder. The smallest one, curious despite everything, approached the fence where she stood. Will they ever trust humans again? She asked softly. That depends on us, Sarah replied, on the choices we make now, on how we help make things right. The morning sun climbed higher over Medicine Waters, casting long shadows through the rehabilitation center's windows. David sat at his desk, surrounded by years of research notes and wildlife photographs, as he waited for Sheriff Elena Martinez to arrive. Maya had fallen asleep on the small couch in his office, exhausted from the morning's events and the weight of secrets finally spoken. Through the window, he could see Sarah tending to the mother bear, her movements deliberate and gentle as she checked vital signs and changed bandages. The cubs had settled into a corner of the enclosure, huddled together in a pile of fresh straw, all except the smallest one, whom Sarah had started calling Spirit, for her curious and resilient nature. She stayed close to her mother, occasionally, touching her nose to the unconscious bear's fur as if checking on her. The crunch of tires on gravel announced the sheriff's arrival. Elena Martinez had been a friend of Lisa's, and she'd watched Maya grow up. As she stepped out of her patrol car, David saw the concern in her eyes, not just the professional interest of law enforcement, but the worry of someone who cared about his family. "David," she nodded as she entered, her eyes taking in Maya's sleeping form. Behind her came Jason Whitewolf, the tribal wildlife officer who worked closely with both the reservation and state authorities. His presence spoke to the seriousness of the situation. Cross-jurisdictional cases like this required careful handling. "Show me everything," Elena said quietly, not wanting to wake Maya. David led them to his research station, where he downloaded the memory card from his spotting scope. The high-resolution images clearly showed the bears chained to the tracks, the distinctive marks of the logging chains, the precision with which they'd been bound. "These aren't amateur chains," Jason observed, his weathered face grim. "These are professional logging chains, and the way they're wrapped." He pointed to several images. "This is someone who knows bears, knows how to handle them without getting hurt. Someone with experience." Elena nodded, taking notes. Maya mentioned Trevor Collins and his uncle. That would be Robert Collins. Owns the Big Sky logging operation up near the reservation border. She looked at David. "There have been rumors about private collectors, exotic animal trades. Nothing we could prove." "Until now," David said, pulling up more images on his computer. He documented every injury on the mother bear, created a timeline based on wound healing and scar tissue formation. This wasn't a one-time thing. These bears were held captive for months. The cubs were born in captivity. Their development patterns show it. Sarah entered the office, wiping her hands on a towel. "The mother's fever is breaking," she reported. "But I found something else during the examination." She handed Elena a small evidence bag containing what looked like a microchip. "It's not a standard wildlife tracking chip. This is something different, more sophisticated." Jason examined the chip carefully. "I've seen these before. In an investigation that went cold last year, high-end private collectors used them to track their investments." The disgust was clear in his voice. "These chips cost thousands of dollars each." A soft sound from the couch made them turn. Maya was awake, curled into herself, looking smaller than her 16 years. "There are more," she said quietly. "More animals, not just bears. Trevor. He showed me videos on his phone. Tigers, lions, even elephants. His uncle has connections all over the world." Elena sat beside Maya, her voice gentle but firm. "I need you to tell me everything, Maya, every detail you can remember. But first, What happened the night your mom died? What are they holding over you?" Maya looked at her father, tears streaming down her face. "I was so angry that night at everything. Mom was gone and nothing made sense anymore. Trevor found me in the hospital parking lot. He had pills, said they would make the pain go away. I took them and I found you," Elena finished softly, "unconscious in your car. I called the ambulance, got you help before anyone else knew, but I never knew where the drugs came from. Trevor helped me cover it up," Maya continued, "but he kept evidence, pictures, texts, said I owed him. When he started talking about the bears, about his uncle's business, I felt trapped. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared he'd tell everyone about that night, that it would hurt Dad even more." David crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering his daughter in his arms. "Nothing," he said fiercely, "nothing is worse than losing you. Not embarrassment, not shame, not anything. You hear me?" A commotion from the enclosure interrupted them. Sarah rushed to the window. "The mother's awake," she reported, "and she's calm. That's good. The cubs are responding well, too." They moved to the observation window. The mother bear had risen shakily to her feet, checking each cub with gentle nudges before accepting water from the automatic dispenser they'd installed. Her movements were stiff but purposeful, showing both her injuries and her determination to heal. "Like mother, like daughter," Jason said quietly, watching Maya watch the bears. Both carrying weights too heavy, both finding their way back to strength. Elena pulled out her phone, sending rapid texts. "I'm calling in the FBI's Wildlife Trafficking Task Force. This is bigger than our jurisdiction. Maya, we'll need you to make a formal statement, but you'll have immunity. You're a minor who was coerced and came forward voluntarily." "What about the others?" Maya asked. "There were other kids involved. Some from the reservation, some from town. Trevor threatened all of us." Jason's face darkened. "Using our own children to help destroy the creatures we're supposed to protect, that's a special kind of evil. Then we'll fight it with a special kind of good," Sarah said, her voice strong with conviction. "These bears chose to come to Medicine Waters for a reason. In our traditions, when an animal chooses to trust you after being hurt by humans, it's a sacred responsibility, a chance to restore balance." David watched as Spirit, the curious cub, approached the window. She stood on her hind legs, pressing one small paw against the glass. Maya, almost unconsciously, raised her own hand to match it. "Dad," she said softly, not taking her eyes off the cub. "I want to help. Not just with the investigation, but here, with the rehabilitation. I want to learn from Sarah, understand the healing process. Maybe help other kids who feel trapped like I did." Elena smiled, the first real smile since she'd arrived. "Turning pain into purpose. That's how real change happens." "It won't be easy," David warned, though his heart swelled with pride. "This investigation could get ugly. People in town might turn against us when the truth comes out." "The truth is already out there," Jason said, nodding toward the bears. "In every scar, every act of cruelty. But so is the healing. In every moment these cubs grow stronger, every time their mother chooses to trust again. Our job is to make sure their story gets told, so the next Trevor Collins thinks twice before seeing wildlife as nothing but a commodity." Sarah began preparing the evening medications for the mother bear. "In our stories," she said, measuring antibiotics with practiced care, "we say that every creature carries medicine, not just healing for the body, but for the spirit. These bears, they're carrying medicine for all of us, teaching us about resilience, about choosing trust over fear, about finding strength in vulnerability. Through the window, they watched as the mother bear gathered her cubs close, creating a protective circle as the evening shadows lengthened. Despite her injuries, despite every reason to fear humans, she had chosen to accept their help. In her choice lay a profound lesson about courage and healing. "Tomorrow," Elena said, gathering her notes, "we start building the case. Tonight, let's make sure these bears know they're safe." She looked at Maya. Both the four-legged and two-legged ones. As the sun set over Medicine Waters, painting the sky in fierce oranges and purples, David felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting, a path forward becoming clear. The morning's desperate rescue had set in motion something larger than himself, larger than his family's pain. It was a chance to heal not just these bears, but the deeper wounds that allowed such cruelty to exist. In the enclosure, Spirit had started playing with a piece of bark, showing the first signs of normal cub behavior. Her siblings watched cautiously before joining in, their antics bringing a smile to Maya's tired face. Their mother observed from her corner, and in her eyes, David saw not just survival, but the beginnings of something more precious. Hope. The dawn brought new challenges to Medicine Waters as David surveyed the morning's chaos. FBI agents moved efficiently through the property, documenting evidence and conducting interviews. Their arrival had transformed his quiet sanctuary into the epicenter of what they were calling Operation Ghost Bear, an investigation that stretched far beyond Wyoming's borders. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, head of the Wildlife Trafficking Task Force, stood beside the bear enclosure, her keen eyes taking in every detail. "Your daughter's testimony opened up something big, Dr. Chen," she said, reviewing files on her tablet. "The Collins operation isn't just about bears. We've uncovered connections to illegal wildlife trade rings in 6 countries. Inside the enclosure, the mother bear, now officially named Luna by the rehabilitation team, watched the activity with cautious interest. Her wounds were healing well under Sarah's care, and her cubs had begun showing more natural behaviors. Spirit, the smallest cub, had even started creating games with the enrichment toys they'd provided, showing remarkable intelligence. Maya appeared at David's side, carrying fresh water buckets. The past week had transformed her as much as it had Luna. Gone was the secretive, troubled teenager. In her place stood a young woman finding her purpose. She spent every free moment helping Sarah with the rehabilitation work, learning about wildlife medicine and animal behavior. Trevor's phone records came in, Maya said quietly, setting down the buckets. They found videos, hundreds of them. Other kids from different towns, all being blackmailed like me. Some of them are coming forward now. David squeezed her shoulder, proud of how she'd faced her fears. Her courage in speaking out had created a ripple effect, giving others the strength to break their silence. "How are you holding up with all this?" Before Maya could answer, a commotion erupted at the property's entrance. A group of protesters had gathered, holding signs supporting the Collins family. Robert Collins was a powerful figure in the community, and not everyone was happy about the investigation. "They don't understand," Maya said, watching the protesters. "Or maybe they don't want to understand. It's easier to believe we're lying than to accept that someone they respected could do something so cruel." Sarah approached, carrying her medicine bag adorned with traditional beadwork. "In my culture," she said, beginning her morning examination of Luna, We have a story about a time when animals could speak directly to humans. The story says we lost that ability, not because the animals stopped talking, but because we stopped listening. These bears, they're speaking to us now through their scars and their strength. Agent Torres nodded thoughtfully. That's why we're documenting everything so carefully. Each scar, each healed fracture tells part of the story. Luna's injuries match patterns we've seen in other cases, creating a timeline of abuse that spans 2 years. David watched as Sarah worked with Luna, marveling at how the massive bear now accepted human touch without fear. She's teaching us something about forgiveness, he observed. Not the kind that excuses wrong actions, but the kind that creates space for healing. Speaking of healing, Maya said, remember that idea I mentioned about starting a program for other kids who've been caught up in wildlife trafficking? She pulled out a notebook filled with carefully organized plans. I've been talking with kids from other cases, learning their stories. So many of them felt trapped, like I did. But working with these bears, seeing them heal, it's showing us a way forward. Agent Torres reviewed Maya's notes with interest. We've seen this pattern before, traffickers targeting vulnerable young people using their pain against them. A peer support program could be revolutionary in breaking that cycle. A loud cheer from the protesters drew their attention. Trevor Collins had arrived with his lawyer, preparing to give a statement to the gathered media. His once confident swagger was gone, replaced by nervous energy as he faced the cameras. I need to do something, Maya said suddenly, straightening her shoulders. Dad, will you come with me? Together they walked toward the media circus. Sarah followed, carrying Spirit in a special transport cage. The small cub had needed additional medical treatment, and her presence created an immediate stir among the reporters. Maya stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. Before Trevor speaks, I want to show you something. She nodded to Sarah, who carefully tilted the cage so everyone could see Spirit's healing wounds. This is what courage looks like. Not just surviving abuse, but choosing to trust again. These bears could have turned aggressive, could have rejected all human contact. Instead, they're teaching us about resilience. Cameras flashed as Maya continued. I was part of this. I helped capture these bears because I was scared and ashamed. But shame grows in silence, and secrets only protect the people who hurt us. Look at this cub. Really look at her. She was born in captivity, never knew freedom until now. But every day she chooses to play, to explore, to trust. That's the kind of courage we all need. Trevor's confident facade crumbled as Maya spoke. His lawyer tried to lead him away, but he shrugged off the hand on his shoulder. Wait, he said, his voice breaking. She's right. He turned to face the cameras. I want to tell the truth, all of it. The next hour unfolded like a dam breaking. Trevor detailed his uncle's operation. The networks of corrupt officials, the private collectors who paid fortunes for exotic animals, the way they targeted troubled kids to do their dirty work. With each revelation, more protesters lowered their signs, some even turning them around to write new messages of support. Inside the enclosure, Luna had gathered her cubs close, as if sensing the importance of the moment. Spirit wriggled in, her transport cage eager to rejoin her family. Sarah carefully returned her, and the reunion brought tears to many eyes as Luna gently groomed each cub, checking them over with maternal care. You see that? Sarah said to the gathered crowd. That's not just animal instinct, that's wisdom. Luna could have rejected Spirit after her time with humans, But she understands something we sometimes forget, that love is stronger than fear, that family means accepting each other's wounds and helping them heal. Agent Torres was already on her phone, coordinating raids based on Trevor's information, but she paused to watch the bears, her professional detachment softening. In law enforcement, we see the worst of humanity. But sometimes, like today, we also see the best, when people choose truth over comfort, healing over hiding. The protesters had transformed into an impromptu support group, sharing stories of their own encounters with the Collins operation. Local teenagers, inspired by Maya's courage, began speaking about pressures they'd faced, secrets they'd kept. Parents hugged their children, learning of pain they'd never suspected. David watched it all, feeling a profound sense of purpose. Medicine Waters had become more than a wildlife rehabilitation center. It was becoming a place of transformation for humans and animals alike. Luna and her cubs were teaching lessons no human could, showing through their actions that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that strength often came disguised as vulnerability. As the sun climbed higher, painting the Wyoming wilderness in golden light, David saw Maya sitting cross-legged near the enclosure, sketching in her notebook. Spirit had settled nearby, mirroring her posture through the protective barrier. Two young souls, both healing, both finding their way back to wholeness. Sarah joined them, bringing her traditional healing drum. Its gentle rhythm seemed to soothe both humans and bears, creating a moment of peace amid the day's intensity. In our ceremonies, she explained, we say that healing happens in circles, not lines. Each person who heals helps others find their way, just as each wound understood becomes medicine for the future. The truth of her words was visible in every direction, in Luna's watchful care of her cubs, in Maya's growing confidence, in Trevor's choice to face his actions, in the community's slow awakening to both the darkness and light within itself. Medicine Waters was living up to its name, becoming a place where broken things could be made whole again, where fear could transform into hope, where the medicine of truth could heal the wounds of silence. Agent Torres approached with new information, but even she paused to respect the moment, understanding that sometimes the most important evidence isn't what can be documented in reports, but what can be witnessed in the quiet moments of transformation, when both humans and animals choose to believe in the possibility of a better way forward. The evening sun cast long shadows across Medicine Waters as Sarah conducted Luna's evening examination, her practiced hands gentle against the bear's healing wounds. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue, and the changes were remarkable. The shin infection had cleared, new fur was beginning to grow over the scarred areas, and Luna's eyes held a calm strength that touched everyone who saw her. "Look at this!" Sarah called to David, who was updating their rehabilitation records. She pointed to where Luna had begun teaching her cubs to forage through the enrichment puzzles they'd scattered throughout the enclosure. She's not just healing physically, she's reclaiming her role as a mother, teaching survival skills they missed in captivity. Before David could respond, a fleet of vehicles approached the sanctuary. Agent Torres led the convoy, followed by tribal police cars and animal transport units. The serious expressions on their faces told David this wasn't a routine visit. "We've found them," Agent Torres announced as she stepped out, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Based on Trevor's information, we raided 3 more facilities. What we discovered?" She shook her head, struggling to maintain her professional composure. "We need your help, Dr. Chen. Your sanctuary is the only facility in the region equipped to handle traumatized wildlife." As if understanding the gravity of the moment, Luna rose to her full height, watching the activity with intelligent interest. Spirit, ever curious, pressed against the enclosure fence, her small face focused on the transport vehicles. Maya emerged from the medical building where she'd been organizing supplies. In the past weeks, she'd thrown herself into learning wildlife, rehabilitation, showing a natural talent that impressed even Sarah. The haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by purpose. "How many?" David asked, already mentally calculating space and resources. 17 bears, including cubs," Agent Torres replied, "plus other species, wolves, mountain lions, even endangered condors. The operation was bigger than we imagined, but these bears—" She handed him a tablet, showing photos that made his blood run cold. "They were being trained for underground fighting rings. They'll need extensive rehabilitation." Sarah studied the images, her face grave. "Like Luna, these bears will carry two kinds of scars, the ones we can see and heal, and the ones that run deeper. But she's shown us the way." She gestured to where Luna was now demonstrating fishing techniques to her cubs in their specially designed pool. "She can help them remember who they are." David watched as the first transport was carefully backed up to their largest receiving area. Inside, he could hear frightened growls and whimpers. These bears had known nothing but cruelty from humans. Earning their trust would be a monumental challenge. "I have an idea," Maya said suddenly. She'd been quiet, absorbing the situation, but now her eyes shone with inspiration. "Remember how Luna first started trusting us? It wasn't through force or even through medicine. It was through spirit, through watching how her cub interacted with us." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "Cubs are natural bridges. They haven't learned to hate or fear completely yet. And Luna's cubs, especially Spirit, they've learned to trust while staying wild. They could show the way." David considered the proposal. It was unconventional, but then everything about this situation was unprecedented. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Let's house the new bears where they can observe Luna and her family," Maya explained, sketching quickly in her notebook. "Not close enough for direct contact, but where they can watch the daily rehabilitation work, see how Luna interacts with us, how the cubs play and learn. Let them witness what healing looks like." Agent Torres raised an eyebrow. "Can that work?" "In our traditions," Sarah said, beginning to lay out medical supplies, "we say that the best teaching happens through example. These bears need to relearn what it means to be bears. Who better to show them than another survivor?" As they discussed logistics, a soft sound drew their attention. Spirit had managed to stack several enrichment toys to reach a higher vantage point, and was now watching the new arrivals with obvious interest. Her siblings soon joined her, and even Luna moved closer, her powerful presence somehow reassuring. "There's something else," Agent Torres said, her voice softening. "We found records at one of the facilities. Luna, she wasn't their first bear. There were others, going back years. Some—" She paused, composing herself. "Some didn't survive. But her story, the rescue, Maya's testimony, it's already making a difference. 3 more trafficking rings have been exposed by kids coming forward. They're calling it the Spirit Effect." Maya looked up sharply. What do you mean? Your story went viral. The video of you speaking truth to power, spirit in her cage, showing her wounds but also her resilience. It's giving people courage. Not just kids involved in trafficking, but anyone trapped in situations they think they can't escape. They're seeing that it's possible to choose a different path. David watched as the first new bear was carefully unloaded, a female not much older than Luna, her once powerful frame showing signs of prolonged abuse. But as she was settled into the receiving area, something remarkable happened. The sound of Spirit's playful chirps caught her attention, and for a brief moment her fierce defensive posture softened. "That's it," Sarah whispered, her eyes bright with understanding. "That's the medicine these bears carry, not just for themselves, but for all who witness their journey. They show us that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that strength often comes through vulnerability." Over the next hours, as more bears arrived, a pattern emerged. Each new arrival responded to the sounds and presence of Luna's family. Some showed fear, others aggression, but all displayed interest. It was as if they recognized something in Luna, a shared experience, a possibility of transformation. Maya worked tirelessly alongside Sarah and David, her young face set, with determination as they processed each new arrival. She had a particular gift for working with the cubs they rescued, perhaps because she understood their confusion, their need to trust despite past betrayals. "You know what I realized?" she said to her father during a brief break. They sat, sharing sandwiches while watching Luna teach her cubs to crack open logs for insects. Natural behavior they should have learned months ago. "When I was caught up in Trevor's world, I felt so alone, like no one could understand, and if they did, they'd never forgive me. But look at Luna. She forgives us every day, chooses to trust even after everything humans did to her." David hugged his daughter close, marveling at her wisdom. "That's the thing about healing," he said. "It ripples outward. Luna's story is helping these new bears. Your story is helping other kids. And all of it together is showing people that change is possible." As night fell over Medicine Waters, the sanctuary had transformed. New enclosures hummed with activity as traumatized bears began their journey toward rehabilitation. Luna remained a calm presence, her occasional soft vocalizations seeming to soothe the new arrivals. Spirit and her siblings continued their curious observation of the newcomers, their natural playfulness offering glimpses of what was possible. Sarah sat cross-legged near Luna's enclosure, softly playing her healing drum. The rhythm seemed to calm both bears and humans, creating a space where fear could slowly give way to hope. Agent Torres, who had seen the worst of humanity in her work, found herself drawn to this moment of peace. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said quietly. "Seen so much cruelty, so much darkness. But this," she gestured to where Luna was settling her cubs for the night, to where the new bears were beginning to relax, to where Maya was carefully documenting each animal's progress. "This feels like light breaking through." "The old stories say," Sarah replied, her hands never stopping their gentle rhythm, "that when we heal one being, we begin to heal all beings. These bears, these children, they're showing us the way back to wholeness, not by forgetting the wounds, but by transforming them into wisdom." In the growing darkness, Spirit's distinctive chirp echoed across Medicine Waters, a sound of pure joy, of life embracing itself fully, despite all attempts to constrain it. One by one, other bears began to respond, their voices joining in what felt like a song of renewal. David looked at his daughter, at the sanctuary they'd built, at the transformation taking place in both humans and animals. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" he said, understanding dawning. "What's happening here? It's bigger than us now." Maya nodded, her face glowing with purpose. "It's like Spirit showed us. Sometimes the smallest among us can lead the way to the biggest changes. We just have to be brave enough to follow." A crisp morning breeze carried the scent of pine through Medicine Waters as David reviewed the latest medical reports. 1 month into the rehabilitation of the rescued bears, progress manifested in unexpected ways. Luna had become more than just a patient. She'd emerged as a cornerstone of healing for the entire sanctuary. In the main enclosure, Luna demonstrated a remarkable behavior that had caught the attention of wildlife experts worldwide. She'd begun vocalizing in unique patterns when the newly rescued bears showed signs of distress, her sounds carrying a calming effect that defied scientific explanation. Sarah called it bear medicine, a healing that went beyond the physical. "You need to see this," Maya called from the observation platform. She'd been documenting behavioral patterns for a groundbreaking study on trauma recovery in bears. Through her lens, David watched as Luna oriented herself toward the enclosure housing Shadow, one of the most severely traumatized bears from the fighting rings. Shadow had arrived nearly catatonic, her spirit seemingly broken by years of abuse. But now, as Luna's distinctive rumbles reached her, she lifted her head. Spirit, true to her name, squeezed through a specially designed small opening between the enclosures, a feature they'd added after noticing her unique ability to connect with other bears. "It's like they have their own language of healing," Maya observed, recording the interaction. "Spirit knows exactly which bears need connection most, and Luna, she's teaching them how to be bears again." Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a renowned wildlife behaviorist who'd flown in from Stanford to study the phenomenon, joined them on the platform. "What you've stumbled upon here is revolutionary," she said, reviewing Maya's notes. "These bears aren't just recovering, they're actively participating in each other's healing. We've never documented anything like it." The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. A small convoy of tribal vehicles approached, led by Jason Whitewolf's truck. Behind them came buses filled with young people, the first participants in Maya's peer support program for survivors of wildlife trafficking. "Remember when we thought we were just saving one bear family?" David mused, watching the arrivals. The sanctuary had evolved beyond anything he'd imagined that desperate. Morning on the train tracks, Medicine Waters had become a symbol of hope, drawing people from across the country who sought to understand its unique approach to healing. Sarah met the group, sage smoke curling from her ceremonial shell as she welcomed them in the traditional way. Among the young faces, David recognized some from the FBI's ongoing investigations, teenagers who, like Maya, had been coerced into participating in wildlife trafficking. But there were others too, young people struggling with various forms of trauma who found hope in the bear's journey. "Before we begin," Sarah addressed the group, "I want you to watch something." She gestured toward Luna's enclosure, where a remarkable scene was unfolding. Spirit had returned from visiting Shadow, and Luna was now demonstrating how to peel bark to find insects, a natural behavior many of the rescued bears had never learned. "Look at how patient she is," Sarah continued, Luna doesn't force the learning. She shows the way, then waits. Each bear finds their own path back to their true nature. Your healing will be the same, guided by those who've walked this path before you, but ultimately discovered in your own time, your own way. Maya stepped forward, her voice strong with newfound confidence. A month ago, I couldn't imagine standing here. Shame kept me silent. Fear kept me trapped. But Luna and Spirit showed me something important, that our wounds don't define us. It's what we choose to do with our healing that matters. As if understanding the importance of the moment, Spirit approached the edge of the enclosure. The young bear who had once trembled in fear now moved with confident curiosity, her interactions with humans marked by healthy boundaries and natural wildness. Dr. Morrison made rapid notes as Spirit demonstrated one of her most remarkable behaviors: using tools to solve problems. She'd learned to stack enrichment items to reach higher places, and now showed this skill to other bears, particularly the younger ones, still learning to trust their own abilities. This goes beyond basic rehabilitation, Dr. Morrison explained to the group. What we're seeing here is the emergence of a healing culture among the bears. They're not just recovering individually, they're creating a community of support. One of the young visitors, a quiet boy named Marcus, raised his hand. How did Spirit learn to trust again, after everything humans did? Maya shared a knowing look with her father before answering. Spirit taught us that trust isn't about forgetting the hard parts. It's about recognizing when something different is possible. Watch how she approaches humans now. She's not afraid, but she's wise. She chooses when to engage, maintains her boundaries. That's not weakness, that's strength. The group spent the morning observing the bears, each person finding reflections of their own journey in the animals' stories. Shadow, inspired by Luna's example, had taken her first voluntary steps into her outdoor enclosure. Two younger bears, rescued from a private zoo, began mimicking Spirit's problem-solving behaviors. "There's something else you should know," Agent Torres announced, arriving with new files. "The Spirit effect we talked about, it's growing. Wildlife trafficking reports are up 300%, not because there's more crime, but because more people are coming forward. Your story, these bears, they're changing how people understand trauma and recovery." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "In our traditions, we speak of medicine stories, tales that carry healing for those who hear them. Luna and Spirit's journey has become such a story, but it's alive, still unfolding. Each person who finds courage here adds to its medicine." As the day progressed, the young visitors began sharing their own stories. A girl described how her family's financial struggles led her into trafficking. A boy spoke about the shame of participating in animal fights. Each story was met with understanding, each speaker supported by the group's collective strength. David watched Maya move among them, offering the kind of comfort that only comes from shared experience. His daughter had found her calling, turning her worst moments into medicine for others. The transformation reminded him of Luna, another mother watching her child grow into unexpected strength. Near sunset, the group gathered for a closing ceremony. Sarah's healing drum provided a gentle heartbeat as each person spoke about what they'd learned. Marcus, who'd barely spoken all day, finally found his voice. "I thought I was too broken to fix," he said, watching Spirit play with her siblings. "But these bears, they were literally in chains, and look at them now. If they can heal, maybe, we all can." Dr. Morrison approached David as the buses prepared to leave. "What you've created here goes beyond wildlife rehabilitation," she said. "You're demonstrating that healing is possible even after the deepest trauma, and that sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest gifts to others." As twilight painted the sky in deep purples and golds, Luna gathered her cubs close. Spirit, however, remained at the enclosure's edge, watching the departing vehicles with that characteristic tilt of her head that suggested deep understanding. "You know what I think," Maya said softly, joining her father. "I think Spirit stays close to humans, not because she needs us, but because she knows other bears do. She's learned that her story can help others find their way back to themselves." David hugged his daughter, remembering the scared girl she'd been just weeks ago. "Like mother, like daughter," he said, glancing at Luna. "You both found ways to turn pain into purpose." Sarah's drum faded into the evening quiet, but its rhythm seemed to linger in the air, a reminder that healing moves in circles, each story connecting to others, each triumph inspiring new possibilities. At Medicine Waters, bears and humans were writing a new kind of story together, one where wounds became wisdom and chains became choices, where the smallest acts of courage rippled outward in ever-widening circles of hope. As spring blossomed across Medicine Waters, the sanctuary buzzed with an energy of renewal. 6 weeks had passed since Luna's rescue, and the transformation was visible everywhere, from the healing bears to the growing community that had formed around their story. But today marked a different kind of milestone, one that would test everything they'd learned about trust and letting go. "The GPS collars are ready," Dr. Morrison announced, laying out the specialized equipment. "All tracking systems are calibrated, and the release site has been thoroughly vetted." She paused, watching Luna teach her cubs to fish in their enrichment pool. "Though I admit I've never seen bears quite so ready for release." David nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. Luna had achieved something remarkable, healing not just physically, but helping to create a new model of rehabilitation. Her methods of teaching other bears had revolutionized their understanding of ursine intelligence and social behavior. Maya approached, carrying her research journal. Over the past weeks, her detailed observations had become the foundation for a groundbreaking study on trauma recovery in bears. Universities were already requesting her data, and she'd been invited to present at an international wildlife rehabilitation conference. "Spirit's been extra active this morning," she reported, pointing to where the smallest cub was demonstrating tool use to a recently rescued youngster. "It's like she knows something's changing." Sarah joined them, her arms full of traditional medicines for the journey ahead. "Animals always know," she said softly. "The question is whether we're wise enough to listen." The sanctuary had grown significantly since Luna's arrival. New enclosures housed bears at various stages of rehabilitation, each one benefiting from what they now called the Luna method, allowing recovered bears to guide the healing of new arrivals. But Luna and her cubs had achieved something more. They'd maintained their wild instincts while learning to trust selectively. "The satellite data from the release site came in," Agent Torres said, arriving with final paperwork. "The area's perfect, remote, rich in natural food sources, and most importantly, protected. The trafficking networks we uncovered have been completely dismantled in that region." The sound of approaching vehicles signaled the arrival of tribal elders and wildlife officials. This release would be different from their usual procedures, not just because of Luna's significance, but because of what her journey represented to so many. Jason White Wolf led the group of elders, carrying ceremonial items for the blessing of Luna's new beginning. In our stories, he explained to the gathered crowd, we speak of animals as teachers. Luna and her cubs have taught us more than we ever expected about healing, about community, about finding strength in our scars. Dr. Morrison reviewed the release protocol with the team. We'll start with a final health check, then transport them at dusk when bears are naturally more active. The release site is a 3-hour drive into the high country. Each bear will be fitted with a GPS collar that will naturally detach after 1 year, allowing us to monitor their successful reintegration into the wild. As the medical team prepared for Luna's final examination, Maya noticed something extraordinary. Spirit, usually the most adventurous of the cubs, had gathered her siblings near their mother. Together, they watched the preparations with an awareness that seemed beyond natural instinct. "Look at that," Sarah whispered, pointing to where Luna was allowing her cubs to investigate the transport crate, something unheard of in normal bear behavior. "She's teaching them that it's safe, that change doesn't always mean danger." The cue. Morning unfolded in a carefully choreographed dance of preparation and ceremony. Tribal elders blessed the transport vehicles, while wildlife officials conducted final habitat assessments. But it was the bears themselves who commanded everyone's attention. Luna entered the transport crate voluntarily, a testament to the trust she'd developed. Her cubs followed, with Spirit pausing at the entrance to look back at the sanctuary that had helped them heal. In that moment, she seemed to embody everything Medicine Waters represented, the bridge between wild and tame, between trauma and healing. As the transport convoy prepared to depart, Maya pulled her father aside. "Remember what you told me that first morning, about how saving Luna might be our second chance too?" Her eyes were bright with tears and purpose. "Look at everything that's grown from that moment." Indeed, Medicine Waters had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. The sanctuary now hosted regular healing circles for survivors of trafficking, combining traditional wisdom with modern therapy. Maya's peer support program had expanded to 3 states, helping young people find their voices and purpose through wildlife rehabilitation work. "Your mother would be so proud of you," David said, hugging his daughter close. "You've turned your hardest moment into hope for others." The journey to the release site wound through pristine wilderness, each mile taking them further from human civilization. Sarah's healing drum provided a gentle rhythm from the lead vehicle, while Dr. Morrison monitored the bear's stress levels through specialized equipment. At a designated rest stop, they found something unexpected, a gathering of people from various communities touched by Luna's story. Former trafficking victims stood alongside wildlife advocates, tribal members next to urban conservationists. All had come to honor this moment of transition. Marcus, the quiet boy from their first youth group, had brought artwork. Stunning portraits of Luna and Spirit that captured their journey from chains to freedom. "They showed me that survival isn't just about making it through," he explained, his voice stronger now. "It's about thriving despite everything that tried to break you." As sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, they reached the release site, a hidden valley rich with berry bushes, clear streams, and natural denning sites. The air itself seemed to hold possibility, carrying the scent of pine and wild freedom. Sarah led a final ceremony, burning sacred herbs as she spoke of transformation. "These bears came to us carrying wounds, both seen and unseen," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "They leave us carrying medicine, teaching us that healing happens in community, that trust can be rebuilt, that freedom is sweetest when it's chosen." The moment of release held its own magic. As the transport doors opened, Luna emerged first, her powerful frame silhouetted against the evening sky. She paused, scenting the air, reading the story of her new home in ways only a bear could understand. Her cubs followed, with Spirit characteristically taking time to observe before joining her family. What happened next astonished even the experienced wildlife officials. Instead of rushing away from human presence, Luna and her cubs spent several minutes at the edge of the clearing. They watched the gathered humans with what could only be described as awareness, as if acknowledging the role these two-legged allies had played in their journey. Then Spirit did something remarkable. She stood on her hind legs, a behavior she'd often used to communicate at the sanctuary, and let out a soft chuff. One by one, other bears they'd helped rehabilitate had copied this sound, using it to express curiosity rather than fear. Now in the wild, it seemed to carry a different meaning. Not goodbye, but rather a reminder that some connections transcend the boundaries between wild and tame. As the bear family finally moved into their new territory, their movements confident and purposeful, David felt a profound sense of completion. Yet he knew this wasn't really an ending. Luna's story had sparked something that would continue to grow and evolve. "The GPS trackers are working perfectly," Dr. Morrison reported, monitoring their movement. "They're already displaying natural foraging behaviors. Look, Luna's showing them how to mark territory." Maya, who had been quietly filming the release, finally lowered her camera. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "6 weeks ago we thought we were just saving bears, but really we were learning how to save each other." As darkness settled over the valley, the group began their journey. Back to Medicine Waters. But they carried with them something precious, the understanding that healing is not just about recovering what was lost, but about discovering what can be born from our deepest wounds. The sanctuary awaited them, still housing bears at various stages of rehabilitation. Yet now they had a proven model of hope, a living testament to the possibility of transformation. Luna and Spirit had shown them that sometimes the smallest acts of courage, like choosing trust over fear or helping others despite your own pain, could create ripples of healing that touched countless lives. In the distance, a bear's call echoed through the mountains, wild, free, and unafraid. It carried the promise of new beginnings, of wounds transformed into wisdom, of chains broken not just by force, but by the gentle power of understanding that we heal best when we heal together. 2 months after Luna's release, Medicine Waters hummed with renewed purpose. The morning sun illuminated a sight that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. Shadow, the severely traumatized bear from the fighting rings, was teaching too. Younger bears how to forage, using the techniques Luna had shown her. Dr. Morrison called it generational healing, a phenomenon never before documented in rehabilitated wildlife. David sat in his office, reviewing the latest GPS data from Luna's family. Their adaptation to the wild had exceeded all expectations. The tracking collars showed them establishing a healthy territory, successfully hunting, and even interacting positively with other wild bears. Spirit's unique social intelligence seemed to have translated perfectly to life in the wilderness. She'd been observed mediating interactions between her siblings and wild cubs they encountered. "Dad, you need to see this." Maya burst into the office, her laptop clutched to her chest. She set it down, pulling up a video that made David's heart swell. The footage, captured by remote wildlife cameras, showed Luna and her cubs encountering another rescued bear family they'd released in the same region. Instead of the territorial aggression typical among wild bears, they displayed the same cooperative behaviors they'd learned at the sanctuary. They're creating their own community out there, Maya explained, her eyes shining. It's like they're taking everything they learned here and teaching it to others. The researchers are calling it cultural transmission of trauma recovery. The sanctuary had evolved too. What started as a desperate rescue had grown into an internationally recognized center for wildlife rehabilitation and human healing. The Luna method was being studied and implemented at facilities around the world, while Maya's peer support program had expanded to include youth from 5 countries. Sarah entered, carrying fresh herbs for the morning healing circle. "The new group is here," she announced, "and they've brought something special." Outside, a diverse crowd had gathered. Among them stood Trevor Collins, recently released from juvenile detention. His testimony had been instrumental in dismantling his uncle's trafficking network, and now he was doing something extraordinary, using his understanding of how animals were captured to help prevent it from happening to others. "I know these routes," he explained to Agent Torres, pointing to maps spread across a table. "I know how they think, how they target both the animals and the kids they use. We can stop them before they start." The morning's healing circle began with a ceremony honoring the 4 directions, but today it included new elements. Marcus, the once silent boy who'd found his voice through art, had created a series of murals depicting Luna's journey. The images lined the sanctuary's walls, showing not just the physical transformation of the bears, but the parallel healing of the humans who helped them. "When I first came here," Marcus addressed the group, his voice steady now, "I couldn't even look at the bears. Their pain reminded me too much of my own. But Luna and Spirit showed me something important, that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strength." Dr. Morrison, who had stayed on to document the sanctuary's unprecedented success, shared the latest research findings. "What's happening here goes beyond rehabilitation," she explained. "These bears are demonstrating sophisticated social learning and emotional intelligence that challenges everything we thought we knew about wildlife recovery." A commotion from Shadow's enclosure drew everyone's attention. The bear, who had once cowered in darkness, was now confidently demonstrating problem-solving skills to newcomers. She had developed her own unique method of using enrichment tools, building on what she'd learned from Luna, but adding her own innovations. "Watch this," Maya said, filming the interaction. Shadow had arranged logs and branches to create a teaching space for younger bears, showing them how to safely investigate new objects. She's not just recovering, she's becoming a leader. The sanctuary's success had attracted attention from unexpected quarters. International conservation organizations sought their advice, while trauma specialists studied their integrated approach to healing both humans and animals. But perhaps most remarkably, former traffickers began reaching out, seeking redemption through conservation work. "It's like Spirit showed us," Sarah observed, watching Shadow work with her students. "Healing isn't just about recovering what was lost. It's about discovering new ways of being, new ways of helping others." The afternoon brought another milestone. A young bear named Hope, one of Shadow's first students, was ready for release. But unlike earlier rehabilitations, this bear had never known Luna directly. She had learned recovery behaviors from Shadow, who had learned them from Luna. It was living proof that healing could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond its original source. As they prepared for Hope's release, Maya shared something remarkable from the latest GPS data. Luna's territory had become a safe haven for other rehabilitated bears. Instead of the usual territorial conflicts, the bears were displaying cooperative behaviors, sharing resources, and even denning near each other during harsh weather. "They're rewriting what we know about bear society," Dr. Morrison marveled. "These aren't just survival behaviors, they're creating new ways of thriving." The release ceremony for Hope combined traditional wisdom with new understanding. Trevor, now committed to conservation, helped prepare the transport equipment he had once used for darker purposes. Marcus painted Hope's story on the transport crate, transforming it from a cage into a gateway to freedom. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Medicine Waters, David found Maya sitting by Luna's old enclosure. She was writing in her journal, documenting not just observations, but reflections on how far they'd all come. "Remember when we thought saving Luna was about giving her a second chance?" she asked as her father joined her. But it was never just about second chances. It was about creating something entirely new. Sarah approached, carrying her healing drum. "In our stories," she said, settling beside them, "we speak of medicine wheels, circles of healing that keep turning, touching everything they pass. Luna's story is such a wheel, still turning, still touching lives." The evening brought news from Agent Torres. Another trafficking ring had been exposed, this time by the traffickers themselves. Inspired by Trevor's transformation, they had chosen to become protectors rather than predators. The spirit effect was becoming a movement, proving that change was possible even in the darkest places. As night fell over Medicine Waters, the sounds of healing filled the air. Shadow teaching her students, Hope preparing for her journey to freedom, new arrivals beginning their path to recovery. Each bear's voice joined in what felt like a song of transformation, echoing the lesson Luna had taught them all, that sometimes the greatest acts of healing come from those who had the most to heal from. David looked at his daughter, remembering the scared, angry teen she'd been just months ago. Now she stood tall, confident in her purpose, using her own healing to light the way for others. Like Luna, like Spirit, like every bear and human who found their way to Medicine Waters, she had discovered that true healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about transforming it into wisdom that could help others find their way home. The stars emerged above the sanctuary, and somewhere in the wilderness, Luna and her family were teaching new lessons about resilience and recovery to the wild bears around them. Their story had become a living testament to the power of transformation, proving that even the deepest wounds could become wellsprings of healing for others. Maya picked up her camera, capturing the peaceful evening scene. "You know what's amazing?" she said softly. "Every bear that leaves here carries a piece of Luna's wisdom with them, and every person who hears their story learns something about their own capacity for healing." In the distance, Hope's transport crate was being prepared for tomorrow's journey. But everyone at Medicine Waters knew that what truly mattered wasn't the destination, it was the transformation that happened along the way, the countless moments of courage that turned victims into teachers, wounds into wisdom, and chains into choices. The autumn winds whispered change across Medicine Waters as David reviewed the latest satellite data on his tablet. 3 months since Luna's release, the GPS tracking revealed something extraordinary, a network of rehabilitated bears establishing peaceful territories across the wilderness, creating what researchers now called healing corridors in the wild. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Morrison exclaimed, analyzing the movement patterns. "They're not just surviving, they're actively creating supportive communities. Look at how they're sharing resources, teaching survival skills to each other's cubs. It's like they've taken the sanctuary's principles and adapted them to wild living." Maya burst into the research center, her face flushed with excitement. "The International Committee approved our proposal," she announced, waving a document. "Medicine Waters is being recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for cultural and natural significance. They're calling it a living laboratory of interspecies healing." The news marked a profound validation of their work, but the real triumph lay in the daily transformations they witnessed. Shadow, once the most traumatized of their rescues, had become their most effective rehabilitation teacher. Her unique methods, combining Luna's teachings with her own innovations, had achieved breakthrough results with even the most severely abused bears. "Watch this," Maya said, pulling up footage from the morning session. Shadow was demonstrating a complex problem-solving technique to a newly rescued cub, using tools in ways that showed remarkable cognitive development. She's not just teaching survival skills, she's showing them how to trust their own intelligence. Again, Sarah entered the center, accompanied by a group of indigenous elders from across North America. They had come to study the Medicine Waters model, a unique blend of traditional wisdom and modern science that was revolutionizing wildlife rehabilitation worldwide. "In our oldest stories," a Blackfeet elder shared, watching Shadow work with her students, "we speak of a time when animals were our greatest teachers. What's happening here isn't new, it's a remembering, a return to ancient truths about healing." The sanctuary had evolved far beyond its original mission. What started as a desperate rescue attempt had grown into a global movement for conservation and healing. The spirit effect had inspired similar sanctuaries on 4 continents, each adapting the model to their local wildlife and cultural context. Trevor, who had completed his rehabilitation program, now led anti-trafficking workshops for at-risk youth. His personal transformation had become a powerful testament to the possibility of change. "When I first came here," he told a group of teenagers, "I thought strength meant control, power over others. Luna and Spirit showed me real strength comes from helping others heal." The afternoon brought a special visitor, Agent Torres, now heading an international task force on wildlife trafficking. "The network analysis is fascinating," she reported, sharing new data. "Every bear released from Medicine Waters becomes a node of positive influence in the wild. They're literally changing the social dynamics of entire ecosystems." David watched as Maya led a group of young conservation students through the sanctuary. His daughter had found her calling, developing innovative programs that combined wildlife rehabilitation with youth empowerment. Her work had been featured in international journals, but more importantly, it had helped countless young people find purpose in conservation. "The most powerful thing Luna taught us," Maya explained to her students, "wasn't just how to help. Bears heal. It was understanding that healing happens in community. Every being has something to teach, something to learn. As if to demonstrate this principle, Shadow had begun displaying a remarkable new behavior. She would gather her students, both bears and humans, in what Dr. Morrison termed healing circles. These sessions showed sophisticated social awareness, with Shadow adjusting her teaching methods to each individual's needs. It challenges everything we thought we knew about ursine intelligence, Dr. Morrison admitted, documenting another successful rehabilitation. These bears aren't just recovering. They're evolving new ways of being, new ways of relating to both their own species and to humans. The evening brought news from the wild. Luna's GPS signal showed her family had established a permanent territory in a remote valley. Remote cameras captured remarkable footage of her teaching wild bears the same cooperative behaviors she'd learned at the sanctuary. Spirit, true to her name, had become a bridge between different bear families, facilitating peaceful interactions that defied typical territorial behavior. "Look at this," Maya called out, reviewing the footage. Spirit had adapted one of Shadow's teaching techniques, using natural objects to create learning spaces for wild cubs. She's combining what she learned here with wild wisdom. It's like she's creating a new culture out there. Sarah's healing drum echoed across the sanctuary as the day's light faded. The sound carried a deeper resonance now, enriched by the stories of transformation it had witnessed. Each beat seemed to carry the voices of all who had found healing. At Medicine Waters, bears and humans alike, a young girl named Rachel, recently rescued from a trafficking ring, sat watching Shadow's evening routine. "I used to think being broken meant you couldn't be fixed," she said softly. "But these bears, they're not just fixed, they're stronger. They're helping others be strong too." The night brought an unexpected gift, the first snowfall of the season. As delicate flakes danced in the sanctuary's lights, David found Maya at Luna's old enclosure. She was adding to the memory wall they'd created, a collection of stories and images documenting each bear's journey from trauma to healing. "You know what I realized, Dad?" she said, pinning up a new photograph. "Every bear that comes here adds something unique to our understanding of healing. Shadow taught us about the power of gentle teaching. Spirit showed us how to bridge different worlds. And Luna, she showed us that sometimes the ones who've been most hurt have the most to give." The sanctuary's success had attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Major universities were establishing research partnerships, studying the unique social dynamics that emerged among rehabilitated bears. Conservation organizations worldwide sought to replicate their methods, adapting the Medicine Waters model to different species and contexts. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the local community. The same town that had once harbored wildlife traffickers had transformed into a haven for conservation. Former hunters became wildlife guides, sharing their tracking skills to protect rather than harm. Local schools incorporated the sanctuary's lessons into their curriculum, teaching children about the interconnection of all living beings. As midnight approached, David stood with Maya and Sarah, watching the snow transform Medicine Waters into a wonderland of white. Somewhere in the wilderness, Luna and her family were preparing for their first winter of true freedom. Their GPS signals showed them denning close to other rehabilitated bears, creating a community of survivors who had learned to thrive together. "The old ones say," Sarah shared, her voice mixing with the whisper of falling snow, "that the greatest healing comes when we learn to turn our wounds into wisdom. These bears, they're teaching us how to do that every day." Maya nodded, adding a final note to her journal. And the most amazing part, the healing never really ends. It just keeps rippling outward, touching more lives, creating new possibilities. In the quiet of the snowy night, Medicine Waters held its own kind of magic. A place where chains became choices, where wounds became wisdom, and where every being, human or bear, could find their way back to wholeness. The sanctuary's story, like the healing it facilitated, continued to unfold in ever-widening circles of hope and transformation. Winter's grip had softened into early spring when Medicine Waters received the news that would mark another extraordinary chapter in its evolution. Dr. Morrison burst into the research center, her typically composed demeanor charged with excitement. As she shared the latest satellite data with David and Maya, "The GPS collars have tracked something remarkable," she announced, pulling up detailed maps on the main screen. "Luna's territory has become what we're calling a sanctuary in the wild. Other bears, not just our rehabilitated ones, but wild bears too, are adopting the cooperative behaviors she models. It's spreading like a positive contagion through the entire ecosystem." The evidence was compelling. Remote cameras had captured footage of Luna and her family demonstrating unprecedented social behaviors. Spirit, now nearly grown but still distinctive in her approach to problem-solving, had been observed creating natural learning spaces similar to those at Medicine Waters, where younger bears could safely practice survival skills. "But here's what's truly revolutionary," Dr. Morrison continued, highlighting specific data points. "We're seeing multi-generational knowledge transfer. Bears that never set foot in Medicine Waters are learning and passing on these peaceful cooperative behaviors. It's challenging everything we thought we knew about Ursine's social structures." Maya, who had just returned from presenting their findings at an international conservation conference, added her own insights. "The scientific community is calling it cultural evolution in action. But what's even more exciting is how it's changing human behavior too. Local communities near Luna's territory report a 90% decrease in bear-human conflicts." Sarah entered the center, leading a group that reflected Medicine Waters' growing influence: wildlife rehabilitators from Asia, tribal leaders from South America, and European conservation scientists. They had come to study what was now being called the Luna Legacy, a revolutionary approach to wildlife rehabilitation that recognized animals as active participants in their own healing and the healing of others. "In our tradition," a visiting Maori elder shared, "we speak of kaitiakitanga, the sacred responsibility of guardianship between humans and nature. What's happening here isn't just rehabilitation, it's the restoration of an ancient understanding." The sanctuary itself had transformed. Shadow, their once traumatized fighter bear, had developed her teaching methods into what Dr. Morrison termed Ursine trauma therapy. Now she seemed to instinctively know which new arrivals needed gentle encouragement and which needed confident role modeling. "Watch this," Maya said, directing their attention to the rehabilitation enclosure. Shadow was working with their newest arrival, a young bear rescued from a bile farm in Asia. Instead of displaying the aggression typical of bears meeting for the first time, Shadow demonstrated remarkable patience and empathy. The young bear, initially terrified of any contact, had begun mimicking Shadow's calm behaviors. It was a process they'd seen repeated countless times, yet it never failed to move those who witnessed it. Each bear that found healing at Medicine Waters seemed to develop their own unique way of helping others heal. Trevor, now fully committed to conservation work, had expanded his youth outreach program internationally. "When I first came here," he told a gathering of former traffickers, "seeking redemption, I thought these bears were just victims of our cruelty. But they've become teachers, showing us how to transform our worst experiences into something meaningful." The afternoon brought a special ceremony, the release of the 100th rehabilitated bear from Medicine Waters. Rachel, the young trafficking survivor who had found her voice through working with the bears, had been chosen to lead the release team. Her journey from victim to healer paralleled the bears' own transformations. "Before I came here," Rachel addressed the gathered crowd, "I thought healing meant forgetting the bad things that happened to you. But these bears taught me that real healing means learning to carry your experiences differently, not as wounds that weaken you, but as wisdom that strengthens others." As the transport team prepared for the release, Dr. Morrison shared groundbreaking research results. The spirit effect had been documented in multiple species beyond bears. Wolves, big cats, even elephants were showing similar capacity for trauma recovery and social learning when rehabilitated using Medicine Waters methods. "We're seeing a paradigm shift in conservation," she explained. "It's not just about saving individual animals anymore. It's about nurturing their capacity to become agents of healing in their own ecosystems." Maya had been documenting these changes through a unique lens, combining scientific observation with personal narratives. Her work, soon to be published as both a scientific paper and a book for general readers, captured the profound interconnection between human and animal healing at Medicine Waters. "Look at this," she said, sharing footage from Luna's territory. The remote cameras had captured something extraordinary. Luna and her family sharing a den site with another bear family during a severe storm. This kind of cooperative behavior had never been documented in wild bears before. "Spirit's influence is particularly fascinating," Dr. Morrison noted. "She's become what we're calling a cultural bridge, actively facilitating peaceful interactions between different bear groups. She's essentially teaching wild bears the social skills she learned here." The evening brought news from Agent Torres. The International Wildlife Trafficking Task Force had adopted the Medicine Waters Protocol for rehabilitating rescued animals. More importantly, they were implementing programs to help traffickers transform into conservationists, following Trevor's example. "The healing we're seeing here," Sarah observed, preparing for the evening ceremony, "it moves in circles, touching everyone it encounters. The bears heal and teach others to heal, the humans who help them find their own healing and become teachers, too." As twilight painted the sky in delicate spring colors, the sanctuary gathered for the release ceremony. The young bear, named Hope by Rachel, showed none of the fear typical of rehabilitation releases. Instead, she demonstrated the confident curiosity they had come to associate with successfully healed bears. "This is what Luna and Spirit started," David said softly, watching Hope investigate her transport crate with calm interest. "Not just a sanctuary, but a new way of understanding healing itself." The release site had been chosen carefully, a valley near Luna's territory, where the influence of rehabilitated bears had created optimal conditions for reintegration. Remote cameras had captured remarkable footage of wild bears actively welcoming new releases, a behavior that would have been considered impossible just months ago. As the transport team departed, Maya shared something powerful from her research. "Every bear we release becomes a teacher in their own right," she explained. "They're not just surviving in the wild, they're actively creating communities of support. It's like they understand that their own healing isn't complete until they help others heal too." The night settled over Medicine Waters, bringing with it a sense of profound possibility. In the rehabilitation enclosures, Shadow continued her gentle work with new arrivals. In the wilderness, Luna and her family led by example, showing that even the deepest wounds could become sources of strength and wisdom. Rachel, watching the last light fade, summed up what many were feeling. "These bears," she said, her voice strong with conviction, "they're not just healing from their past trauma, they're creating a new future. For themselves, for other bears, for all of us. They're showing us that sometimes the most powerful medicine comes from the very beings we once thought needed saving." As stars emerged above the sanctuary, their light seemed to carry the promise of continuing transformation. Medicine Waters had become more than a rehabilitation center. It was a living laboratory of hope, where every day brought new evidence that healing, when allowed to flow freely, could transform not just individual lives, but entire ecosystems of both humans and animals. The legacy of one mother bear's courage on those train tracks had grown into something none of them could have imagined, a movement that was changing how the world understood both wildlife conservation and trauma recovery, proving that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from forgetting our wounds, but from transforming them into bridges that help others find their way to wholeness. The first anniversary of Luna's rescue dawned with a revelation that left even the most experienced researchers at Medicine Waters in awe. Dr. Morrison's team had compiled a comprehensive report documenting what they called transgenerational healing patterns, evidence that the rehabilitated bears were not only maintaining their recovered behaviors, but actively teaching them to their wild-born cubs. "This changes everything we thought we knew about wildlife rehabilitation," Dr. Morrison explained, presenting her findings to an international panel of experts gathered at the sanctuary. "We're seeing second-generation bears, born completely wild, displaying the same sophisticated social intelligence that Luna and Spirit pioneered." Maya, now recognized as a leading voice in youth conservation leadership, had organized a special anniversary event that brought together survivors, rehabilitators, and transformed traffickers from around the world. The gathering represented a powerful testament to the ripple effects of that fateful morning on the train tracks. "A year ago," she addressed the assembled crowd, "we thought we were saving one bear family. We had no idea we were actually witnessing the birth of a movement that would transform both wildlife conservation and human healing." The sanctuary had expanded significantly, now incorporating specialized rehabilitation areas based on the unique methods developed by their pioneer bears. Shadow's teaching enclosure had become a model for trauma recovery in aggressive bears, while Spirit's problem-solving techniques had been adapted for various species of wildlife. Sarah, working with tribal elders from multiple nations, had established a traditional healing center that combined indigenous wisdom with the lessons learned from the bears. "Our ancestors always knew that animals were our greatest teachers," she explained, leading a ceremony to honor the bears' wisdom. "What's happening here is a remembering of that ancient truth. The most remarkable developments, however, came from the wild. Remote cameras in Luna's territory had captured unprecedented scenes of cooperative behavior among different bear families. Spirit, now fully grown but still distinctive in her approaches, had been observed creating natural healing spaces where injured or traumatized wild bears could find safety and support. "Look at this," Maya pointed out during a review of the latest footage. Spirit had adapted Medicine Water's rehabilitation techniques to work in a completely wild context, using natural materials to create safe learning environments for other bears. Her innovations had spread through the bear population, creating what researchers termed wilderness sanctuaries. Trevor's work with reformed traffickers had evolved into an international program called Guardians of the Wild. Former poachers and animal traders now use their knowledge to protect the very creatures they once exploited, creating a powerful model of redemption and transformation. "The most powerful thing Luna taught us," Trevor shared with a group of former traffickers, "wasn't just about saving animals. It was about the possibility of complete transformation, about how our darkest moments can become our greatest opportunities to make a difference." Rachel, who had become an accomplished wildlife photographer, had documented something extraordinary: wild bears actively seeking out rehabilitated bears during times of stress or injury. "They seemed to recognize something in these bears," she explained, sharing her images. "It's like they can sense that these survivors carry a special kind of wisdom." The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Agent Torres, who shared groundbreaking news. The Spirit effect had been officially recognized by international law enforcement as a proven model for combating wildlife trafficking. "We're not just shutting down trafficking networks anymore," she explained. "We're transforming them into conservation networks." David watched from the observation platform as Shadow worked with their newest arrivals, 3 young bears rescued from an illegal zoo. Her methods had grown increasingly sophisticated, showing an almost intuitive understanding of each bear's unique needs. "She's not just teaching them survival skills," Dr. Morrison observed. "She's teaching them how to thrive, how to trust, how to become teachers themselves. It's a complete reimagining of what rehabilitation can achieve." The evening ceremony brought together elements from multiple healing traditions, honoring the universal wisdom that the bears had helped uncover. As Sarah's healing drum mixed with traditional songs from various cultures, the bears in the rehabilitation enclosures added their own voices, creating what one elder called the song of renewed harmony between humans and nature. Maya shared powerful new data from their long-term tracking program. Luna's territory had become a catalyst for ecosystem restoration, with the bears' cooperative behaviors influencing everything from plant distribution to predator-prey relationships. "They're not just healing themselves," she explained. "They're healing entire landscapes." The night sky above Medicine Waters seemed to hold special significance as the anniversary celebration continued. Stories were shared around sacred fires, stories of transformation, of healing, of finding strength in the most unexpected places. Each tale added to the growing understanding that true healing was never just about individual recovery, but about creating ripples of positive change that could transform entire communities. Dr. Morrison unveiled plans for an international research center dedicated to studying what they now called communal healing behaviors in wildlife. What started with one bear family has grown into a new field of study, she announced. We're seeing similar patterns emerging in rehabilitated elephants, wolves, and other social species. As midnight approached, the sanctuary fell into a peaceful quiet broken only by the natural sounds of the healing bears. In her office, Maya added final notes to her upcoming book, The Spirit Effect: How One Bear Family Transformed Wildlife Conservation. You know what's most amazing? She asked her father, who had joined her for this quiet moment. A year ago, we thought success meant helping these bears survive, but they showed us that survival was just the beginning. They taught us that true healing means becoming strong enough to help others heal too. David nodded, remembering that desperate morning on the train tracks. Luna chose trust when she had every reason to fear, he reflected. Spirit showed us how to bridge different worlds, and Shadow proved that our deepest wounds can become our greatest gifts to others. The anniversary celebration had brought together people who would never have connected otherwise: scientists and spiritual leaders, former traffickers and conservation officers, troubled youth and tribal elders. All had been touched by the profound wisdom that had emerged from one mother bear's courage and her cub's resilience. As the first light of a new day touched Medicine Waters, the bears in rehabilitation stirred with purpose. Shadow began her morning routine, teaching her students the delicate balance between strength and gentleness. In the wild, Luna and her family continued to reshape what was possible for their species. And Spirit, true to her name, remained a bridge between worlds, showing that the greatest healing often comes through helping others find their way to wholeness. The sanctuary had become more than a place of rehabilitation. It was a living testament to the possibility of transformation, a proof that even the deepest wounds could become wellsprings of wisdom, and a reminder that sometimes the most profound teaching comes from those we thought needed saving. Looking out over the sanctuary that had grown from one desperate rescue, David felt a profound sense of possibility. The bears had shown them that healing was not a destination, but a journey, one that grew stronger and richer as it was shared with others. In choosing trust over fear, in transforming trauma into teaching, they had created something that would continue to grow and evolve, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of Medicine Waters. The morning light caught the mist rising from the valley, creating halos around the rehabilitation enclosures. Somewhere in the wilderness, Luna and her family were beginning another day of showing the world what was possible when healing was allowed to flow freely, when wounds were transformed into wisdom, and when the circle of compassion was allowed to grow ever wider. 18 months after that fateful morning on the train tracks, Medicine Waters stood at the threshold of a new chapter. The spring air carried the scent of renewal as David reviewed the latest findings from their long-term study of rehabilitated bears in the wild. What had started as a desperate rescue had blossomed into a worldwide movement, transforming not just wildlife conservation, but the very way humans understood healing. "This just came in from the satellite tracking team," Maya announced, rushing into the research center. She projected a series of images onto the main screen that left everyone speechless. The footage showed Luna and her family participating in something unprecedented, a gathering of over 20 bears, both rehabilitated and wild, sharing resources and teaching skills in ways that defied all previous understanding of bear behavior. Dr. Morrison, who had extended her stay at Medicine Waters indefinitely, could barely contain her excitement. "We're witnessing the emergence of a new social structure," she explained, analyzing the footage. These bears aren't just surviving. They're creating sophisticated communities of support, teaching and learning from each other in ways we never thought possible. The evidence was undeniable. Luna had established what researchers now called a healing territory, a safe space where injured or traumatized wild bears could find refuge and learn the cooperative behaviors that had become her family's trademark. Spirit, her influence now extending far beyond the sanctuary's boundaries, had been observed actively mediating interactions between different bear groups, preventing conflicts and fostering peaceful coexistence. Sarah, working with a global network of indigenous healers, had integrated these discoveries into a new understanding of wildlife rehabilitation. "The bears are showing us what our ancestors always knew," she explained during a ceremony honoring the sanctuary's success. "That healing is not a solitary journey, but a communal dance of renewal." The morning brought a special visitor, a renowned primatologist who had adapted Medicine Water's methods to work with traumatized chimpanzees in Africa. "What you've discovered here goes beyond species," she shared with the team. "You've tapped into something universal about how healing happens in the natural world." In the rehabilitation center, Shadow continued her remarkable work with newly rescued bears. Her methods had evolved into what Dr. Morrison termed peer-led trauma recovery, a sophisticated approach where healed bears actively participated in the rehabilitation of newcomers. The success rates were unprecedented, challenging everything known about wildlife rehabilitation. Trevor, now heading an international coalition of reformed traffickers turned conservationists, shared powerful news. "The networks that once caused so much harm are being transformed," he announced to the gathered staff. "Former trafficking routes have become conservation corridors. The same people who once captured animals are now their fiercest protectors." The afternoon brought the completion of Medicine Water's newest addition, a state-of-the-art research and education center dedicated to studying what they called interspecies healing. The facility would serve as a global hub for understanding how animals and humans could help each other recover from trauma. "Look at this," Maya called out, reviewing footage from Luna's territory. The cameras had captured something extraordinary. Wild bears actively seeking out Luna's family during times of stress or injury, as if knowing they carried special wisdom about healing. Spirit, in particular, had developed a remarkable ability to identify and approach traumatized bears, showing them the same gentle patience she had learned at the sanctuary. Rachel, whose photography had brought Medicine Water's story to the world, shared her latest project, a documentary series showcasing the ripple effects of Luna's rescue. "Every bear that heals here becomes a teacher," she explained, presenting her work. "And every human who witnesses their transformation learns something profound about their own capacity for renewal." The evening ceremony brought together an extraordinary gathering. Scientists and shamans, former traffickers and wildlife officers, troubled youth and tribal elders, all had been touched by the wisdom that had emerged from one mother bear's courage and her cub's resilience. Agent Torres arrived with groundbreaking news. The United Nations had adopted the Medicine Waters Protocol as an international standard for wildlife rehabilitation and trafficking prevention. "What started here has become a global model," she announced. "We're not just saving animals anymore, we're transforming entire systems of care and protection." As twilight painted the sky in delicate spring colors, David found Maya adding final touches to her latest research paper. Titled The Lunar Legacy, How One Bear Family Revolutionized Wildlife Conservation, it documented not just the scientific breakthroughs, but the profound spiritual and emotional impact of their work. "You know what's most remarkable?" she asked, watching Shadow guide a new arrival through their first day of rehabilitation. "We thought we were teaching these bears how to heal, but really they were teaching us about resilience, about community, about the transformative power of choosing trust over fear." Sarah approached, carrying her healing drum. "In our oldest stories," she said, beginning a gentle rhythm, "we speak of a time when animals were humanity's greatest teachers. What's happening here isn't new, it's a remembering, a return to ancient wisdom about how all beings heal together." The night brought a special moment, the release of medicine. Water's 200th rehabilitated bear. The ceremony combined elements from multiple healing traditions, honoring the universal wisdom that had emerged from their work. As the transport vehicles departed for the release site, something extraordinary happened. Wild bears near the sanctuary began vocalizing, their calls echoing through the valley in what felt like a song of welcome. Dr. Morrison shared final data from their long-term study. The spirit effect had been documented in multiple species across different continents. Elephants, wolves, big cats, and even marine mammals were showing similar capacity for trauma recovery and social learning when rehabilitated using medicine. Waters methods. "What we're seeing," she explained to the gathered crowd, "is nothing less than the evolution of healing itself. These bears aren't just recovering. They're pioneering new ways of being, new possibilities for how all beings can support each other's growth and renewal." As the stars emerged above Medicine Waters, David reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate moment on the train tracks to this point of global transformation, every step had been guided by the wisdom of the bears themselves, their courage to trust again, their capacity to turn wounds into wisdom, their gift for teaching others the path to wholeness. The sanctuary had become more than a place of rehabilitation. It was a living testament to the possibility of transformation, a proof that even the deepest wounds could become sources of healing for others, and a reminder that sometimes the most profound teaching comes from those we thought needed saving. Somewhere in the wilderness, Luna and her family continued their work of showing the world what was possible when healing was allowed to flow freely, when trauma was transformed into teaching, and when the circle of compassion was allowed to grow ever wider. Their legacy lived on in every bear that found healing at Medicine Waters, in every human who discovered their own capacity for renewal, and in the growing understanding that true healing was never just about survival. It was about creating ripples of transformation that could touch lives far beyond the boundaries of any sanctuary. As the night settled over Medicine Waters, the sound of Sarah's drum merged with the natural chorus of the healing bears, creating what felt like a song of possibility, a reminder that even in our most broken moments, the potential for transformation is always present, waiting like a seed in frozen ground for the warmth of spring to help it grow into something beautiful and new. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.